Welcome back, Wolfpack. Verlis here to a VGC 2016 guide for Giratina. Now, Giratina is going to be a pretty straightforward guide. We're not looking to be an overwhelming, legendary Pokemon of mass sweeping potential that we're not trying to, look for every little bit of matchup and damage calculations against, oh, how do I one-shot this Pokemon? What do I need? Giratina is pretty much like a supportive Pokemon that can do damage, or a damaging Pokemon that can provide support depending on what you're going for. If you're going for a more supportive Giratina, go with the regular form. If you're going for a damaging Giratina, go with the origin form, and that's kind of given by the item. So we're going to break down how the Giratina ends up working, but it's really not that complex in doubles that you might add a little extra support. You're pretty much just going to be playing Giratina and going with it like that. So I haven't seen too many Giratina on the battle spot, and I decided to go to the global link to see what people are running for Giratina, and it's pretty much always going to be a Shadow Force. That when we see it, Shadow Force, Draco Meteor. So high base power moves, trying to put out little bits of damage because we're not going full heavy offensive investment. Also, we're going to be mixed, as you can see from the Shadow Force and the Draco Meteor. We have physical and special hits, so we're kind of splitting up to do optimal damage, but not overwhelming damage. And then we have Will-O-Wisp, Tailwind, and maybe a Protect. So Protect is on 25% of regular Giratina, and it looks like it's going to be on a higher amount, 62. So 1 in 4 compared to 2 and 3 for the origin form Giratina, but that's going to be a more offensive Pokemon. We have Shadow Force, we have Draco Meteor, Shadow Sneak, and then less supportive on the Will-O-Wisp and Tailwind. But it just kind of shows, we're going to see very similar moves. The Magic Coat, I really like that tech. So we can maybe integrate a Magic Coat into one of the sets if we see that works out really well. If they have a Smeargle, if they have something like that, oh, Dark Void, I'm just going to Magic Coat. Sure, one of my Pokemon falls asleep, but now both of yours are asleep, and I have a Giratina. As for natures and stuff, we see a lot of Adamant, we see some Brave. Held item is going to be the Grizzlia's Orb, because to have origin form Giratina, you just give it the orb, and now it's going to have boosted damage to its stab, and then be really awesome like that. So that's just kind of the breakdown of Giratina, and when we look at it, for the regular Giratina, we're not going to be incredibly fast, 90 base speed, but we want to be more tanky is how it feels. So that way we can just slap on the leftovers, and that's where we go support. Our first hit, we're just going to go Tailwind. So Tailwind, since we're Ghost type Pokemon, we can't get faked out except from a scrappy Pokemon like an Mega Evolved Kangaskhan. So we set up our Tailwind, now we're going to be able to outspeed. Now we can provide whatever support we want. We go for a Will-O-Wisp. If they have a Pokemon like Kangaskhan, if they have a very hard-hitting physical Pokemon that isn't a fire type, we just Will-O-Wisp it. Now it's burned, now it's doing less damage to us, now it's doing less damage to our allied Pokemon, or we could just go for the Draco Meteor. Very high amounts of damage, 130 base power, and then it's going to get stab on top of that, and then we also have the Shadow Force. Shadow Force is a supportive move in a way, because what happens is it breaks protection, and if you Tailwind into Shadow Force, you're going to be landing that Shadow Force in a very, very fast way. So if they try to protect, well then Giratina is just going to break that protection, and if your allied Pokemon is slower than Giratina, then your opponent has nothing to do. They have no chance to hide, and they also might not want to chance it. Giratina, when it uses Shadow Force, it doesn't say it uses Shadow Force on that opponent's Pokemon, it just says it vanishes. So Giratina stays mysterious about it, and they can either try to protect on the Pokemon they don't think is getting Shadow Forced and miss it. So you have to also think ahead of your opponent in that. But other than that, it's really solid damage. 120 base power, good stab, and I mean it's 100 base attack. So even without investing into it, we're going to be doing good amounts of damage here and there. If we go full investment, we can go max hit points, max attack, or max hit points, high special attack, or we can also just go with a really crazy nature, like a high special defense nature, since we're going with that Will-O-Wisp. Get a little bit of Will-O-Wisp chip damage, use Draco Meteor once for super effective strong hits, and then Shadow Force it out for the rest of the game. Keep refreshing Tailwind, just stay around, be an annoyance, and eventually the damage pressure will catch up to the opponent, so they will have to deal with the unbelievable tank that is Giratina, and that kind of works out pretty well. Also, there is an interesting thing that there is a telepathy Giratina that was given away with the Hoopa movie. So Origin Giratina will always have the levitate ability. It doesn't have the other ability, so if you just slap on the Grizzlia's Orb, you don't have to worry about telepathy. If you have regular Giratina though, Earthquake. Can freely Earthquake with that Giratina while also doing Draco Meteor and stuff, so it's a benefit. However, if you are running the telepathy on the Giratina, it has to be a brave nature. So high attack, low speed, could work on a Trick Room. It does give you those kind of options to play around with, and that's the weird thing about VGC 2016 is that 90 base speed can play into both sides, that a lot of Pokemon have that 90 base speed, and we're seeing a lot more around the 100, 110 as the average fast Pokemon. The average sweeper, we have Kangaskhan. We have Mega Kangaskhan. That's only 100 base speed. We have other Pokemon that are hanging around that 100. Primal Kyogre. It runs Modest with a 90 base speed. Rarely timid, but sometimes you can kind of use the Pokemon Global Link to really figure out who's running what and then play around your advantages like that. So I'm using this for an extra layer to the guide on Giratina, since I really didn't know too much about Giratina going in, and it seems pretty straightforward, but it's also really well-rounded in what the Giratina can do. So a Brave Trick Room, you know, that's when you slap on the 0 IVs, try to drop as low as possible. This underspeeds quite a bit, and you're going to want to make that work on the Trick Room for you, unless you're running the Tailwind. So again, if you're running Brave, don't run Tailwind. It puts you into some really interesting situations on that. And if we look at this, you know, you can go Shadow Force Assault Vest, Draco Meteor, Earthquake, Shadow Sneak. Giratina has really good offensive coverage that you can go for a nice little split right here. I was thinking what we want to do is go 180 on the hit points, 120 on the defense, and then max out the attack with an Assault Vest. So they're not going to be doing too much special defense damage to us. Our defenses are still going to be pretty high, and if we have like another Will-O-Wisp Pokemon or a Pokemon with Intimidate, we bring Giratina next with an Assault Vest next to an Intimidate Pokemon. That's just going to be really hard for your opponent to break, and then you throw out the Draco Meteor, go for a pretty solid hit. Draco Meteor Shadow Force, that's KO. Draco Meteor Earthquake, that's good amounts of damage. You have Shadow Sneak to pick off any survivors, and you have another Pokemon dealing good amounts of damage. So it's just going to be a very bulky threat, providing backup damage to your sweeper, and that's really what we're looking for, and it works out really well. So I'm thinking Giratina does have some playmaking potential to be made right there. Now you can run this on the Origin Giratina, but you will have to have the Grisius Orb. You won't be able to Assault Vest it, but it gives you good coverage. Earthquake into Stab, that's also getting the Grisius boost. It's pretty nice. And regular Giratina can run the Life Orb, so there is some optimization that you can play around with, like Tailwind into Life Orb damage. You know, this Giratina doesn't have to be absolutely bulky, that you can Shadow Force a Life Orb with a max attack, or you can play around with it a bit depending on what your team needs, but I see it more as just heavy defenses, unbreakable Pokemon, chips in a little bit of damage. But if you're going for the Origin form Giratina, you can Tailwind into Will-O-Wisp and then just have more damage for it. One really fun thing about this Giratina is the 128 on the defenses. It's actually going to make you slightly more tanky than if you just went 252 on the hit points and attack. So this is going to be unoptimized, and I feel that you kind of want the defensive investment even on a Giratina that's going to be offensive. Like, I feel the Tailwind is an absolute must because you're just going to outspeed anyway. So if we went, say, Timid Nature or a Jolly Nature, or we try to get some weird speeds going in, I don't think it's going to work as well as if we just go Tailwind into Sweep. Tailwind into Sweep works out pretty well, and that means we can add that Protect. We can get rid of Will-O-Wisp. Maybe Will-O-Wisp isn't as necessary for the full offensive Giratina, but it still lets us get those defenses in there and be relatively tanky, doing high amounts of damage. If you don't want to have any tankiness, that's fine too. That's when you can change it around. For this, you can go something like a Naughty Nature and then add some special attack. I'm wondering, like, max special attack would be absolutely crazy, but that Draco Meteor would hurt. And the reason why I'm doing a Naughty Nature to drop on the special defense is that there's a lot of other Dragon-type Pokemon that are legendaries that are using Draco Meteor. Any Dragon-type Pokemon has a target on its back, and it's just going to get blown up by a Draco Meteor, so we might as well sacrifice the special defense. Also, Dark attacks, Ghost attacks, we're going to be seeing Ice attacks. A lot of Giratina's weaknesses are on that special side, so we can just kind of cut our losses there, but I feel that we can still play tanky and survive some off super effective hits and play with the Giratina. And that's another reason why we're not seeing too much Giratina, is it has a lot of weaknesses. So you have to play very, very well to those weaknesses and find out what your Giratina needs to get that Tailwind, to find that success, or at least to tank up effectively enough. And then we can go and look at some damage calculations. So, Origin Giratina versus an Abomasnow. Like, I'm just kind of using this for flat damage. Let's say we have an Adamant, Grisius Orb, Giratina Origin form with max attack roughly, and then we're using that against any normal Pokemon. So we'll actually find a one-hit KO against a 90 base hit points, 75 base defense Pokemon, and what about 80? Even 90 and 80. So most sweepers will get one-shot by the Shadow Force. Most frail Pokemon will actually go down to that. I mean, take a Pokemon like Thundurus. Thundurus is on that realm of 79-70, so we get to one-shot one of those Pokemon while staying relatively safe. And that's just kind of the damage breakdown of the Origin form, which is the more offensive. If we're going for regular Giratina, not so much. 78 to 92%, so it shows it still puts out good damage while going full attack invested, but for full defensive invested, still looks pretty well as well. We can two-shot Pokemon with this Shadow Force. We can still get good damage. Say there is a Mega Rayquaza, even no investment whatsoever, we're still going to be able to do solid amounts of damage. Now, we are going to be very threatened by its Draco Meteor if it is carrying that, but Dragon's Ascent Still solid damage right here. We're immune to the extreme speed. We don't have to worry about too much, and it depends on how you're supporting it. You fake out Mega Rayquaza, you go for the Tailwind. Now you have a super fast Draco Meteor. If you are looking for those very specific KOs, like the KO onto Mega Rayquaza, maybe you don't want Brave Nature. Maybe that's when you just slap on the Modest, go for a little bit of investment right there. So I'm looking in the range of 160 with KO, and then the rest can go into hit points, and then probably special defense. So you can max that out. You can still carry your Will-O-Wisp. And then after that, you just kind of carry on with other Pokemon. So your Giratina can clean up the Rayquaza if you play that properly. It has to worry about the fake out. You don't have to as much. You can worry about the opponent's Pokemon as well. You get into some weird situations that are just common in doubles, that you have to get into some mind games and predictions and make sure that they don't have the perfect support that trumps your support. But in general, you can find the right ways to play around other Pokemon, even with the tankier Giratina, even with the more offensive Giratina, and it gets into some really interesting breakdowns. Like for Aegislash, we have Giratina Origin Form. If it has a max attack and it's going up against a full defensive Aegislash shield, and it has to be full defensive with a special attacking nature. If not, say it has 100 defensive EVs, and then it also has some special defense backing, you're going to start finding those KOs on it, and you can just outspeed, just destroy the King's Shield, and Shadow Force is going to end up obliterating an Aegislash, so that can work out in your favor pretty well. Or you can use the tankier Giratina, just break the King's Shield, hit it with another move, and then it goes down in 2 hits pretty effectively. And then there's the Primal Kyogre matchup, and Giratina Origin does good damage against that, while also not taking too much in return. So just know that the regular Giratina is going to be even tankier than this, but if we're going for that offensive range, say we have max attack, max hit points, adamant nature, trying to do as much damage with the Shadow Force, we can do more damage to Kyogre than it does to us, and it needs to use the Ice Beam if it has any chance of doing substantial damage to us. But Primal Kyogre lives and dies by that Origin Pulse. It needs to do huge damage to both opponents. If it's just using the Ice Beam to not knock out a Giratina, Giratina is going to Shadow Force a ton of damage, or it's also just going to set up Tailwind. It's going to have it to where now your other Pokemon gets to just get huge damage on the Primal Kyogre, and it's a really good disruptive Pokemon. As I said earlier, and I think these damage calcs are more about supporting that, it's there, it's going to annoy you, it's going to eventually 2-shot a lot of things if you have the right investment. It's going to be a 3-shot Pokemon for itself, so it can take 3 hits, it can knock you out in 2. It's not overwhelmingly threatening from the start, but it will be there, it'll loom, and it'll be absolutely destructive, but at the same time, does have a lot of weaknesses. It gets outsped by a Draco Meteor, none of this guide matters. You need to support it in that realm, or you also just kind of have to play it properly. Just, you know, don't lead with the Giratina. Maybe bring it in when you know that Draco Meteor is forced out by some other kind of threat on your team. You go for that second round, that, okay, they took out one of your Pokemon, Giratina comes in, it's safe to set up Tailwind, and now you have a couple of turns to gain momentum back and swing that battle back in your favor. And Giratina, it could be in that, you know, it can be the second Pokemon on the field and then the last to leave. It's going to keep threatening your opponent, which could be pretty awesome. So if you guys enjoyed the video, that's Giratina. Very, very awesome Pokemon to talk about in doubles. Has a lot of cool things. I enjoyed using the Pokemon Global Link. Sometimes I look at, like, I'll just glance at the moves and try to come up with my own movesets from there. But at the same time, this works out pretty well for a Pokemon that I didn't think was going to do much, and it still has a lot of cool things. So yeah, Shadow Sneak, Dragon Claw. Maybe the substitute does also carry the Destiny Bond, Tailwind Destiny Bond. If you want to go for a more full supportive, you can get rid of Draco Meteor, go Destiny Bond. Okay. Tailwind, Will-O-Wisp, Destiny Bond. Now, one of your opponent's Pokemon's Will-O-Wisp, the other one's knocked out, you have a Tailwind for a couple more turns, and you just kind of go and destroy from there. So if you guys enjoyed this video, that's Giratina, and I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you for watching.